And my name is Bob Cervelli. I'm one of the people involved in Transition Bay. What is Transition Bay? We're part of the International Transition Network. It was started in 2004 in Totnes, England, and it went viral around the world. There's 50 transition towns in Canada alone. There's countries all around the world. We're probably the most active in Atlantic Canada. This is our 14th year. And we've done an enormous amount of workshops like this, projects, all kinds of things along the way. So what I would ask is there's a sign-up sheet on the table. If you're not signed up and getting our newsletters, please put your email address down there and you'll find everything that's going on. We've already got a pretty full schedule for this coming spring. And I got the list. I'm going to go grab it real quick. Actually, Dawn,
Yes.
give me the list of events on the table. I'd appreciate that. So we got a lot of things. We tend to do food-oriented stuff, just like this workshop. Great, thank you. So on March 22nd, that's Saturday, we're partnered with the Gardening Club, St. Margaret's Bay Gardening Club for Seedy Saturday. That's a huge event. There's got to be a handful of Seedy Saturdays take place already in the province. This is the big one for the Bay Area. On April 6th, there's going to be a workshop here, Community Economic Resilience in Uncertain Times. You know, we're being timely here with all the trade disputes that are starting to boil up, not just between Canada and the US, but what about China and Europe and everywhere else? So we're going to talk about how do you create more local economic resilience in the community. On April 27th, planting for preservation. So when you're getting ready to plant your garden, how do you plant it? What are all the things that you can preserve and how you're going to preserve it? Then there's going to be permaculture as a gateway to food sovereignty. That's, again, it's a food-oriented one. It's a very big one these days, particularly with food prices and so on. That's on May 4th. Then next fall, we're already booking things. This is going to be a really interesting one on October 26th. If you want to learn how to make bread out of acorns, this is your chance. Under this one, harvesting and preparing wild staple foods. So it's all on our website. You get it all in the newsletter if you sign up. So all I wanted to say is there's coffee and tea available in the back. Don't be bashful. We've got mugs, but I think we might need some of the mugs for the workshop. So without further ado,
The trees. Mention the trees.
oh yes, we do have another project on the go. These are Saskatoon trees, service berries. We ordered 60 of them. They need to be planted in pairs so they can cross-pollinate. And we're looking for homes. If you've got room for 2 service berries, please let us know. Okay? I see some heads bobbing up and down, so that's great. Okay, so what I want to do is introduce our guests here. Ember Peters and Oren Hercz. They've come, they founded the Maritime School of Holistic Herbalism. So they teach out of Blockhouse. But Oren, I think you're out of Chester Basin. And Ember, you're out of the Valley, Annapolis area.
Yep.
Okay. So they get around, but they give these great workshops. You can see some great literature on the table already. This afternoon, we're going to learn about the philosophy of herbal medicine. We're going to get into healthcare. What are the resources and how do you match make herbs in healthcare? And how do you build immune system resilience with vitalism, energetics? I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And we get to sample some stuff. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, welcome everybody. Welcome to Rising to the Health Challenges of Our Times with Herbal Medicine. I guess I'll just mention right off the bat, with this class, part of what we're doing with this class is also building awareness about our programs, and particularly our intermediate program, which starts in May. So we're going to take a little break in the middle, and after we'll share a little bit about that program. Aside from that, we're going to really be digging into, what are the health challenges of our times, and how is herbal medicine one of the ways that we can rise to those health challenges, and sort of what is the approach or an approach that Ember and I have landed on in terms of what are the principles to be guided by if you're interested in pursuing education, self-study, or professional study, any kind of study in herbal medicine, so that you can, if it's something that interests you, so that you can be an effective and also ethical herbalist. So we're going to be talking about our principles, and then we'll be kind of doing some hands-on stuff that sort of applies the principles with tasting the medicine, which we'll do after the break. So that's kind of the sort of overview of the whole class. And then before we just dive in, I thought we just give a very short introduction. We're going to share a little bit of our stories about how we came to become herbalists as part of the talk. But just by way of very brief introduction, for those of you that have never met either of us, I'm a clinical herbalist, which means I work one-on-one with people in a private practice and on their health issues. So I work with people with different kinds of chronic health issues in a one-on-one setting, and we create herbal programs. And then I also do this herbal education work with Ember. And that's just sort of the in a nutshell, who I am. And
Your practice is in Herbal Bay.
my one-on-one practice is in Herbal,
Yeah, and I'm Ember, and I practice mostly out of the Valley, so I'm in the Bridgetown, kind of Annapolis area. And I also have a clinical practice, so I also do one-on-one work with folks both in person and online. Run this program with Oren, which is definitely kind of like, I don't know, I think for both of us are like herbal education kind of like baby we care about a lot. But I also teach other classes and do other like one-off day-long workshops and things like that. So there's lots of other ways that you can learn from us as well. And I just want to say about the handouts. I know we have one more handout here. Hopefully they can get passed out, but we'll print more out at the break. So maybe before the break, we'll just get a show of hands and we'll see how many copies we. Yeah, we just worked for months and we're really excited you all are here. And yeah, we will do, as Oren said, more. We'll share more about ourselves in a little bit.
And just to make sure I don't forget to mention it, if anybody afterward, if you're interested in this kind of stuff and want to just stay connected with us and know what other types of things we're offering, we do have a sign up for our newsletter on the table there, so you can always just sign up for that. So, should we dive right in?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we're going to start by just talking about setting the scene for, what are the health challenges of our time. It's worth just identifying, what's the state of health, in the world right now. And I think it's worth just acknowledging that, there truly is an epidemic of sorts of chronic illness in, here in Canada and the world, just generally speaking, in the world right now. And I think the latest stat is about 45% of people have at least one chronic health condition, and many people have a combination of chronic health conditions. So this is something that's going on. It's very common for people to have these kinds of health issues now. And why is this happening? One of the things we can say right off the bat is that our healthcare system is pretty poorly equipped to handle chronic health issues. It's really evolved and was designed to be an acute care model. So it's really, really great for emergencies, trauma injuries, and any kind of acute emergency type situation. But when it comes to managing chronic health issues or even healing, it's not even really a word that is used in the healthcare system. It's really much more of a Band-Aid approach where there's some symptom relief that can be offered, but there's not a lot there. And that's just how that system was created and evolved over time. And so what you end up having is a lot of people falling through the cracks, right? Oftentimes we even have people that don't even have a diagnosis because maybe their blood work looks fine, and they can't really say what's quote unquote wrong with you. And but obviously, the person is suffering or having issues. And so a lot of people fall through the cracks that way. And there's also an issue with how the care is delivered, right? Like it's a very top-down model. So people often don't feel empowered in healthcare situations. It's more like you're just told this is what you need to do, go do it, or you don't do it, as the case may be. So those are a lot of the issues that are going on in our on the system wide level. And I think a lot of people also don't have the confidence necessarily to explore other options, because this is the system that we've all been raised in. So even if you might have the thought of like, oh, maybe there's another way, maybe there's herbs, maybe there's some other sort of natural way to do this, because it's not as prevalent or something that we're really used to using every day in our lives, it can be hard to take that step to try something different, because we're really all sort of have been sort of raised in this one model. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at with the system. And then in terms of why we might be having these chronic health issues in the first place, I think there's a lot of different reasons that we could talk about. But one reason that I want to illustrate is that our world that we've created, so the built environment that we live in, is not suited to our evolutionary requirements. So our requirements as biological beings, which haven't changed, right, for thousands of years. Those requirements have not changed, whereas our built environment has changed, dramatically, and especially in the last 100, 200 years, it's changed, exponentially. So a lot of the things about how our built environment is really are not conducive to our long-term thriving. And so these are all kinds of things like, not having enough exposure to sunlight, to, the industrial food system, right? Right. Yeah. To the industrial food system, to, our technology. I think that's a really big one that people are realizing now, that this kind of always on technology, social media that we're dealing with is actually quite stressful to our nervous systems, and stress has a lot of knock-on effects in terms of our health. So, yeah, we have this kind of mismatch, and an easy analogy that you can use to understand this is an analogy of a zoo, where you take an animal from its natural environment and you put it in a zoo, and all kinds of problems start to arise. A lot of animals don't reproduce in captivity. It's much easier for them to have health issues. And so our built environment is kind of like our zoo. And I don't want to overstate it, in the sense that we are also very adaptable. And there are a lot of benefits that our modern world has brought us. And I don't want to sort of brush that aside. It's really both. It's not like an either or, like the modern world is good or the modern world is bad. It's more about, in order to thrive in this world that we live in now, that we've created, we have to be actually quite intentional about how we interact with the environment around us, and what we do and what we don't do. It's really, you can't just sort of fall into what everybody else is doing and expect to be able to thrive and to be healthy. You have to actually be quite intentional and thoughtful about it. And, herbal medicine is part of that, can be part of that. So that's that aspect. And then I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about some of the other challenges.
Yeah, I'm going to get a little bit more into perhaps maybe why it's not always possible to do the things that we know we should do, right? To better our health. And the first thing I kind of am going to highlight there that I think takes quite a large toll on our health, that it's hard. It's kind of almost hard to talk about because it's such a given, but it's just the fact that we all have to work, right? And for most of your, life, most people are working full time in order to pay for your basic needs, right? You have to have housing, you have to have food, right? And in order to do that, you sort of have to buy into this, system where you find a way to, work within it. And that kind of comes along with this overall value where, being able to go to work, being able to be productive, whatever it is, actually is valued more than the value of taking care of ourselves, right? Or listening to our bodies even, right? So this kind of comes back to what Oren was talking about, where we actually have an immense cultural normalization of not listening to our bodies, right? Because we actually, for a lot of the time, can't. Because if we did, we wouldn't necessarily be able to do the thing that we need to do anyway, right? Yeah, and so that's happening on an individual level, but this also is happening on a, we can kind of zoom out a little bit and see that on a community level, see that on a level of how we relate to the earth and the land as well, right? Where, this sort of the wheels that have to kind of keep turning become more important than, the health of our communities or the health of the land that we live on as well. And then, we also need to acknowledge within this that, whether someone can sort of access the things that, might be better to take care of, that might be kind of like these self-care things that would help, good food and access to like healthy outdoor space and, fresh organic vegetables. These kinds of things are a privilege, right? These are not things that most people are actually able to access or afford. So we also have this system where there's this huge inequality with being able to like even just kind of participate in like wellness culture, right? So the other sort of piece to this, so we have this sort of, overall dominant culture that is in itself kind of a barrier that we have to kind of figure out how to, unravel to some degree to be able to connect with ourselves and even know what we need. Then we have this, process of, more systemic inequality, right, that impacts who can even do that. And we have also in this picture the overall impacts of, Oren mentioned it before, stress, right? And we know that, there's also a base normalization of stress, right? Most people experience more stress than on a daily basis than our systems are able to handle in a balanced way. But then we also know that that is something that does not proportionally affect everyone evenly either, right? If you experience discrimination or poverty, we know that you also are likely to experience much higher levels of stress as well. So that also is a known cause of a lot of chronic illness. So we also have, people who might face the most likelihood of sort of chronic health issues, also having the least access to be able to have support through it. Then there's sort of, we're going to kind of even zoom out a little bit further and just imagine a little bit of how this came to be. And, as herbalists, as we're going to kind of get into some of our principles, we tend to think in bigger systems, right? We tend to kind of want to have a holistic picture and try and understand what is the root of the imbalance, right? So one of the things that, in our discussions and understandings of the world is really feels pretty clear is a big root of this kind of pattern is disconnection from land, right? And so that can be, from the process of, colonialism, where people are forcibly displaced off of their lands, right? But also, we could say like we all come from, whether we're indigenous to this land or not, we all come from a lineage of people, an ancestral lineage where there was a connection to land somewhere at some time, right? And yeah, this disconnection from land has, individual effects. So, it creates this kind of mystery, like we don't know why we're sick. And it also has a kind of a cultural effect because of kind of what I was talking about before, like we view the land as something to be extracted from, as something that is there to sort of like serve us and give us resources, rather than something that we are a part of. And I think that has a really big implication on also how humans are treated, right? So we're also, in a way, through this, process of work, we're also kind of treated as, a being to be extracted from as well. So this is a, bigger kind of picture pattern. And so, we know that like especially indigenous ways of knowing really do make that connection, right? That we are not separate from the land, that we are a part of the land, right? And then when we even just start imagining that, we can start to see, that actually has so many different implications for how we would treat ourselves, how we would treat each other, and how we would treat the land. So coming back to, what makes this a health challenge, one of the things that I think about here is also the like loss of that knowledge, right? That cultural understanding of being in connection is, for most people, quite severed. And that in itself actually, like that disconnection is actually a stressor on our bodies and our nervous systems. And we also have the erasure of the cultural knowledge that would kind of support the bringing us back to the land, right? So we could, consider that's like, okay, the criminalization of, indigenous knowledge and lifeways, which includes herbal medicine traditions, but even, just kind of the devaluing of that as an idea, even of a way of life, right? Yeah, I think that's pretty much. I think that's kind of what we were trying to say.
I
Yeah.
was thinking as you were saying that even physically, like even the physical environment is degraded. Like there's the like emotional aspect, the stress aspect, but there's also the simple fact of like the physical environment being degraded and like polluted, and like that also connects back to the health challenge.
Yeah, definitely pollution and exposure to all these a lot of people in our environment. Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna the next part is we're gonna one of the things is like, we didn't say everything that is a health challenge, right? So we just want to acknowledge that. We kind of do some, lumping of things. And there, of course, are other health challenges that people are going to have individually and even, in a community that might not be necessarily fully encompassed by this. So just want to acknowledge that. We're going to share a little bit about our stories. The reason being that we want to kind of share from a more personal level, like how we came to find that herbal medicine was kind of something like what it could offer us in response to these challenges, right? Yeah, so I'm going to share a little bit and then I'll pass it over to Oren to share a little bit. Yeah. So I first came to herbal medicine, I would say in my like late teen years. I was very, very involved in like the all ages music scene and the DIY punk scene. That was like my world. And one of the things that was very prevalent at that time, in the early 2000s, was like people would would share a lot of information freely in the form of zines. Anyone know what zines are, right? Little photocopy and half page, right? And so every show that you go to, there'd be people tabling all these zines of different kinds, whether it's, some of it might have been like, kind of even like political ideas. Some of it was like how to make compost, whatever, like so many things in this do-it-yourself mentality, right? So that was the first place that I encountered herbal medicine. And I found these zines that were talking about plants that were weeds. And these weeds were medicine. And I was just like completely floored by this. Because I was like, wait, whoa. Like, these are plants that are growing like everywhere. They're growing in people's backyards. Take dandelion, for example. And it felt like this symbol of like collective agency and autonomy. Like, this could never be taken away from us, Yeah, so it just felt like for me there was always this element starting out of like accessibility, right? That this couldn't be completely gate kept. This couldn't be something that was kept from the people, right? And as I started to study more, do more self-study, I also started getting more politically active. And one of the things I was doing a lot of indigenous solidarity work, going to land reclamation camps, things like that, and just like helping out. And so that was when I was more introduced to the actual experience of connecting to the land collectively. So I really started to see not like, and that was a lot of the times through plants too, right? Through the sharing of plant knowledge, through the medicines. That was like very important for how people connected to the land. And I started to see that not only was herbal medicine kind of this thing that we could, use to maybe like help our kidney stones or something like that on our own and not have to go to the hospital, yay, whatever. But it was also something that was actually, I started to see how it could actually heal this disconnection piece, right? Where we're actually sharing in the medicine and the innate kind of collective aspect of sharing in that connection. I also started to see a lot more of the systemic inequality, right? So seeing how many people fell through the cracks. I was very inspired by different like mutual aid type projects, right? Where people would, set up to do healthcare, like offer healthcare to maybe migrant farm workers or, a group of people or people who are houseless, right? People who wouldn't have as much access. And I started to really just see that sort of more more of that possibility of how herbal medicine could be so supportive for people who were falling through the cracks of the healthcare system, especially for people who had those kind of extra barriers. So that's a lot has happened since then. I ended up going to herb school in Vermont, doing my whole clinical herbalism training program there, really meeting a community of herbalists who I shared a lot of those values with, and meeting teachers who I shared those values with. Also seeing the ways that herbalism was helping my own health and my own body with things that I was struggling with. And I've now been in clinical practice for about 11 years or so. And I've been teaching for about 8 years. And, I think that for me, my practice is very much like sometimes, we're zooming in. Sometimes I'm working with someone one-on-one and we're really trying to figure out what is the origin of this specific symptom or something like that. And then, but, a big part of our work as well in zooming out, like, especially with education, right, is like understanding this within the larger picture and really seeing how herbal medicine can be this like one really important tool for people to feel a regained sense of agency and connection, both with themselves, with the land, and with each other. And really seeing that, like, even when I'm working with people one-on-one, that is still a part of it, right? So just kind of like continuously being inspired by the ways that plants bring us together. Yeah. Pass it over to you.
I think my story also started as a kind of a healing from disconnection, of like my own disconnection from at the time it felt like a disconnection from a sense of purpose. So I grew up in Ottawa, like kind of your average suburban kid, playing computer games in my basement and just kind of like doing that Ottawa suburbs thing. And I went to a university. I studied liberal arts, which I did find quite stimulating, studied a lot of philosophy and stuff like that. But afterwards, I genuinely felt quite lost and sort of adrift. And I don't think I could have identified it at the time, like what was sort of nagging at me. But now that I have this language, partly through having studied herbal medicine and just sort of understanding some of the things that Ember was just talking about just feeling sort of disconnected and alienated from nature, I think that was genuinely something that was going on for me. It's like I just didn't see a lot of purpose in the types of paths that were being laid out for me, and for myself. And so I went through kind of like an aimless, you could say, or like exploratory period in my life where I was living rurally, and I started gardening. Like I joined a community garden, and like I found a lot of meaning in that, and just like digging in the dirt. I'm sure people that are involved with transition bay can kind of relate to that kind of thing, where it just felt more nourishing for me. And so I just started doing that. And then through this process of community gardening, at one point, one day, I was just talking with somebody who knew some things about herbs, and just pointed out like that, there was like some St. John's wort growing in my garden. It's a weed, common weed. And oh yeah, that's St. John's wort, and it can be, it's used for depression or something like that. And I was just like, what? And now, I mean, a lot of people know about St. John's wort now, and I say St. John's wort and depression, probably most people are like, yeah, we know about St. John's wort. But at that time, that was about 20 odd years ago, there wasn't as much knowledge about these things. And so I certainly didn't know anything about any plants that could be used as any kind of medicine, or that they even could. It's just like literally not something that it's just like weird to even think now, like that wasn't something that had really crossed my mind, that like, oh, there's these plants are medicinal. I was really into growing food at the time. I was very practical. I mean, plant medicine is practical too, but in a different way. But at the time I was like, yeah, I'm going to grow my food. And so I was into that. And then this whole other world sort of opened up for me with that conversation. And it led me to take an apprenticeship. Though I found a herbalist local to that area, and I studied with her. And through that experience, I really felt that sort of kind of almost like this reweaving of this web and connection with the plant world. And I remember at one point sitting in that class, we would often do classes in her garden, and just sitting and just looking out and seeing like where I had once seen just like a wall of green, I now saw like all these friends, companions of the different plants, and I knew kind of individually, and that had their own personalities and their own uses, and I'd already used some of them at that point. And so it was a real joyful aha moment for me of like, wow, this has really brought me so much, just getting to know the plants in this way. And at that time, I didn't even really have my own health issue that I was struggling with. I saw a lot of people do come to herbal medicine through a health issue, like they have a health problem, and then they find the herbs, and then that really, having that experience really sets them on their path. But it wasn't like that for me right at the outset. It was more this other thing where I was just feeling lonely and sort of isolated, and then the plants sort of brought me home to myself. But later on, after having studied for a little bit, I did actually get quite sick. And I got really sick with a severe digestive problem, which was never really diagnosed. It was called, said it was IBS or something like that. Doctors couldn't really figure out what it was. It was definitely stress related. I was had a new baby at home. I was like doing a really stressful job. I had traveled and had like got a stomach bug, but never really healed. And so I just ended up with this digestive issue that was very severe, and was sapping my energy. And I was worried I wasn't going to be able to continue working and supporting my family. Again, some of the things we're talking about, really stressful. And at that time, since I'd already been studying herbal medicine, and I had mentors and people that I could get support from, I had through this second crisis, I had really this experience of the plants really supporting me and helping me to resolve this issue, which I was able to resolve. And one of the plants that we're going to talk about today, later, marshmallow root, which is right here, was one of the main plants that I leaned on during that time, which helped me so much. And again, even though at that time I already had some of the knowledge, it's one thing to sort of have knowledge, and it's a one thing to really have experienced the healing in your own body. And so for me, that was like just like another level of acknowledgement of like, wow, these plants are really powerful. This medicine is really so important for us all. And that really set me on my path, and then it led me to study to be a clinical practitioner, and then of course to teach is something that like I think Ember and I both really do, out of the sense of, yeah, this is everybody's medicine. This isn't just something to be sort of a gate-kept or for sort of practitioners to hold. This is something that everybody can learn and understand and benefit from. So that set me on my path, and that's kind of how we got here, kind of in a nutshell. So those are our stories, and so we want to move on from sharing that with you to, okay, so now we've been at this for a combined 30 odd years between the two of us, of practice. What are sort of the principles that we have landed upon in terms of understanding how herbal medicine works, and understanding like what is a good approach for somebody wanting to come into this knowledge and learn this knowledge for themselves. So we've basically broken it down to, and this is not like the only principles. These are like our 5. We like put our heads together and like, what are our main, key principles? And we sort of broke it down to these 6 principles. So I'm going to start it and share a few of them, and then Ember will share the others. So the first principle is the principle of vitalism. So vitalism is a term that, if you study herbal medicine, you come across it. And put simply, this principle is that everything in nature has a natural drive towards vitality. So this is just the essence of the principle, is that everything, humans, plants, animals, everything that is of nature, biological, has a drive towards vitality. It wants to not just survive, but thrive. And so we could call this drive the vital force. And illnesses are partly or entirely due to an obstruction of this force. Something has gotten in the way of this natural thriving. And humans and all living beings actually have this innate ability to heal. So something is impeding the vital force, and we have an ability to find our way. And as herbalists, our job is really to observe, investigate what is getting in the way of the vital force here, and sort of help the vital force come through in whatever way we can, whether that's with herbs or with dietary strategies, lifestyle, whatever that might be. What we're really trying to do is support this vital force. So that's principle number one of vitalism. And it is, if you think about it, quite different than the medical approach to health, which to simplify it dramatically, the medical approach to health is much more mechanistic in the sense that the medical system looks at us more or less as machines, or kind of a biological machine, and that can get broken, and then we have to try to fix it. So this is like very different, the mechanistic view versus the vitalist view, and leads to different approaches to healing. And I think you can probably see that just in terms of sort of how medical treatments are offered, and if you ever worked with a herbalist, how we might approach a situation where somebody's ill. So the last thing I just want to say about the vitalist approach before we move on to the next principle is that if you're holding that approach, it actually gives you quite a different window into like how to approach somebody who is feeling unwell or is sick in some way, in the sense of you're never really going to approach the same illness twice. So it's really going to depend on the person, because we want to know how is the vital force being obstructed in that person. Whatever the technical name or diagnosis of that disease is, it can manifest very differently in different people. So this whole idea of having like a pill that goes with an ailment, like you have this disease and you need this kind of remedy for that disease, doesn't really work with the vitalist approach, because the remedy is for whatever it is that's obstructing the vital force for that person. And we're going to get into when we drink the teas and we do some of the hands-on, hopefully this will become a lot more concrete in terms of like what that looks like in practice. So that's principle number one. Principle number two is, and it ties very closely to this principle of vitalism, is energetics. And this word energetics probably means a lot of different things to different people. But what we mean in this context of herbal medicine, when we talk about energetics, is the energetics in a person indicates how the vital force, so we have this vital force, the energetics indicates how this vital force might be obstructed through excess dampness, dryness, heat, or cold. So these are these properties of dampness, dryness, heat, or cold. And so when we look at what's obstructing the vital force, we often look at it in terms of these energetic terms. So to give a really quick example, let's say you have a cough. So instead of thinking, I have a cough, what's the cough pill? What's the anti-cough thing? If you take a vitalist perspective, you would ask, okay, where is this cough coming from? What is obstructing the vital force in this situation? And to look at it energetically, we would think, okay, well, is this a cough that has suffering from excess dampness or excess dryness? So a cough suffering from excess dryness, a dry cough, is going to be a dry, hacking cough, a lot of spasming and hacking, no mucus or not much mucus at all. That's a dry cough. Whereas a damp cough is going to be a cough where there's a lot of mucus coming up, or running nose, all those kinds of things. And we would use actually different approach for those two coughs. We wouldn't give the same medicine for those two coughs. And so these energetics that exist in the person also exist in plants. So the plants are also moistening or drying or warming or cooling. So the plants have these same vital properties, and you usually use the opposite, the opposite for the opposite. So you use a drying plant for a damp thing. You use a moistening plant for a dry condition. So this is a lot, when you really get into applying the herbs, this is like, this principle of energetics is pretty important for using them effectively. Now, you don't have to use herbs this way. You can use them in a more of a biochemical way, in terms of understanding, oh, this herb is like antibacterial, or like these are sort of these more biochemical ways that we might think of the actions of a plant. You can use them that way too. But we found, and all the herbal traditions basically are laid out this way, that if you apply the energetic model, you can get much better results and much more consistent results working with different types of people. So that's the principle of energetics. Okay. I'm doing nature connection for you. Yeah. Okay. So the third principle is the principle of nature connection. So I don't think it'll be a surprise to y'all after hearing us talk about, the importance of connecting with the land, that nature connection is actually a vital part of the study of herbal medicine. And what we mean by that is that if you're studying herbs, to do it in a way where you are actually connecting with the plants themselves. So you're either outside, experiencing them, seeing them in the different phases of the growing system, growing seasons. You're tasting them, you're touching them, you're smelling them. You're actually getting to know the plants. It's not just an academic exercise. And the reason for that is, well, there's lots of different reasons why that's really important. So one really simple, like kind of practical reason is that it's easier to learn. It's easier to remember stuff. So if you're just learning herbal medicine out of a book, you're basically having to memorize, okay, what's this plant? This plant has all these properties and all these uses, and it's, you're going to forget it. It's pretty much impossible to remember all that stuff, even if you've studied it for many years. we can vouch for that. But if you've tasted the plant, if you've touched it, if you've smelled it, then you actually learn a lot about the plant's properties by those things. Like the taste itself actually tells you what the plant's good for. And we're going to get into that in the hands-on portion. And so then you don't forget. Then you kind of get this plant, like this sort of, for lack of a better word, the personality of this plant is like burned into you and you don't forget actually how that plant can be used, and sort of just becomes just part of your embodied knowledge. And so it's a really great way to learn herbal medicine. So there's that kind of practical aspect. But then on a deeper level, it is this thing that Ember was talking about, where part of the medicine of plants, or part of the reason to be learning herbal medicine, is actually to heal our disconnection with the land and to learn how to once again be in an intimate relationship with the plant world, and which then extends out to everything, right? So you do it as an exercise with the plant world, but then that translates into relationships with animals and relationships with humans. It's just about actually being connected with other living things. And so we think that's just like such an important part of a herbal path, is to like be connected with these living beings. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. There's a few more principles that we'll share, and then we'll open it up just for a minute there to see if anyone has questions. We'll move on to the section after that. I'm going to talk about integrative healthcare, right? So from, the way that both of us practice, we see the importance of each person getting to really see what works best for them and be able to choose that best healing path for themselves, right? So we don't think that there's just one way. And I think that's, this is something that, especially if we're, on social media, things like that, we're often bombarded with a lot of people saying that they have the exact one answer that is going to solve all of your health problems or something like that, right? And we are here to say that it's not that simple, right? That it's really important to have that part of having that individualized approach, like an energetic approach and a vitalist approach, is also understanding the unique situation that each person finds themselves in, the unique severity, presentation, etc., that's going to help that person to, choose what method might be best. And so with herbal medicine, we work alongside Western medicine a lot. So an example would be, for instance, I do some amount of cancer care. Now, I pretty much only work with people who are going through the mainstream medical system, right? They're doing all the treatments that can make people really sick. And so I'm using herbs to help support them to have less side effects, right? To help sometimes even help treatments work better, right? Help relieve some symptoms, things like that, right? Strengthen parts of the body, keep the vital force strong through that process. Now, there's many people for whom that might be the best approach, right? Herbs might be the thing that actually helps somebody be able to tolerate better and have better results from the Western medical approach. And then there might be people who choose more to use herbs as their more daily kind of healthcare. And they might use more of the medical system when they need it, right? Okay, I have a UTI or something like that. Okay, like I can go to that and use that when I need it. So we're just, we just don't want to be dogmatic and say that this is going to just be it's not going to shine for everything, right? We want to use the best of both worlds. We want everyone to have more tools in their toolbox, right? Rather than to be more limited. So that feels really important. And we also know that, like we were talking about before, there are a lot of gaps that the healthcare system might not be able to fill in. And so, even when people do have access to healthcare, there might be in a lot of situations where there isn't something that healthcare offers you for XYZ, right? And where herbs might be able to, even to like the common cold being an example of that. So we know that it just feels really important. Like we want to acknowledge and be realistic about and also discuss and be able to talk about the inadequacies of the healthcare system without throwing it all away either. That feels really, really important. In the same way that we don't want people and the culture to also throw away herbal medicine because it is not just a replacement for, right? These are different tools. And we think that, there's a lot of different tools that we need in our, individual and collective wellness, right? The next piece is around actually like how we learn. And I think that we are in a very changing context around the ways in which people learn. This came up in my advanced program a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about research skills, and this group of students who were all like training to be clinicians. They were all like, we have to talk about AI because like that's what people are using now to learn empiricism, And I just kind of put my notes away. I was like, okay, you guys can look at the handout and read the slides, but we need to actually talk about this, right? Because it's actually the way in which information is getting kind of watered down. And, whether it's because of AI or just because of consumerism, the way things are watered down and simplified to be sort of sold to us as a product, it's actually not that easy to just get reliable information from the people who are actually practicing the thing. So the first kind of guideline that we have for you if you're wanting to learn about herbs is to learn from people who are practicing with the plants, right? It doesn't have to be someone who's registered or whatever, but like someone who has actual experience. And, we have a list of sources in the back of your handout. So there's some book recommendations. I'm realizing like we need to add websites to that too, because so many people are looking online, right? But we're kind of suckers for having a book to flip through, right? So we'll get with it. We will update that eventually, but that's what we would call like a primary source, right? When you're learning from someone who's actually doing it. So, I think that just thinking about critical thinking, right? When you're looking, and, we all sometimes go to Google. We all can sometimes be like, oh, what's this thing, right? Like, no shame, right? Something we all do. But we need to have our critical thinking hat on when we're looking at any information about herbalism online, I think, where we're asking ourselves, who wrote this? Where did they get this information from, right? Like where did this knowledge come from? How did this come to me? And, in that you might find, herbalists or, people who you actually share values with as well is important. There's a lot of different herbalists out there and we don't all agree on everything, which is great and beautiful, right? Because it means that for you as someone who might be interested in learning more, you can actually find someone who's more aligned with your values, right? People tend to be more attracted to learning from Oren and I, who share values around like ecological sustainability and accessibility, right? Those are things that are really important to us. But someone might have more of a specific interest or more of a specific value that another person might be able to, kind of share with that person more. And I think, I just wanted to say as well that it's not that the information when you're like, if you're looking online, something that's not that the information is necessarily wrong, right? So say you're looking for something to help with cognition and you see a supplement for lion's mane or something like that, and it might have like 2 sentences. It's like, it boosts this and it does this and it supports this, right? It's like, well, those things might be true, right? But it's not actually giving us a sense of, but who might this actually be the most appropriate for, right? And so being able to do that, step back, that's really what we're trying to, encourage people to do, is to step back and kind of look at a bit of a bigger picture. And, that supplement might help you. And it's not that it's like, it's all just bad information. It's just very watered down and very much within this kind of mechanistic model of thinking that's part of the dominant culture, rather than kind of doing that more holistic view, that vitalist and energetic view. And then the last principle that we think is really important, kind of goes along with nature connection, which is like community connection. So a lot of people, especially who live rurally and live in places where there aren't like herb schools and colleges, a lot of people study online, which is not necessarily just a bad way to study herbal medicine. But we do think that learning in some kind of community is important, right? So I think about like, when I was in herb school, I gained so much from other people's questions that I didn't think to ask, or the people around me who were excited about something that I wasn't excited about, but I still got to learn from their excitement. So even if people are doing like self-paced online learning, we think it's important to like, okay, maybe have a buddy, maybe have a group of people that you meet with and share what you've learned with each other, have some kind of way to bring that community aspect in. We also think that like learning in community, especially when it is with the plants, that it also gives us kind of an opportunity. I'm sure this is, very similar to a lot of the work that you all do too. Like, it gives us the opportunity to also like imagine different ways of being with the land, of being with each other, right? And it actually is in itself healing to have that kind of connection. And then the last piece is that, the kind of Oren mentioned this, that like there's a lot of, we might encounter a lot of, kind of like devaluing of this knowledge, which also means that as we're learning it, we can also very easily like convince ourselves that this isn't real, or for whatever reason, it's like people will kind of, we call it like imposter syndrome, in clinical practice, like, we have doubt. We have doubt that this is as significant as it might be, or we have doubt that the herbs will work well or something like that. And so we also think that community is a really good way to like support each other through that, and, just help to keep each other kind of on the path, right? Build confidence and build like networks of support. Yeah, so those are kind of our like main principles that we thought of when we wanted to be like, okay, what do we think are some of the most important things, given our experience, that you should be kind of thinking about if you are wanting to kind of go into herbal medicine practice? Yeah, any questions or thoughts about all of that so far?
I do have a question, just like you're both running a clinic and just in general, the healthcare system. Yeah, sure, I'll speak louder. And just in terms of the, like your clinics or the healthcare system, there doesn't seem to be a lot of monitoring as to what's working and what's not working. Like the doctor, well, I assume my doctor's like other doctors, but they don't really say, oh, and how is this working? Or did you try this and how did it go? There's no dialogue. So I was just wondering if in your own practices, what kind of monitoring do you do? Like what kind of, how do you monitor how effective something is for someone? I just like,
it can be tricky.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes we might be recommending, a tincture with 5 herbs in it, plus a dietary thing, plus maybe, supplement and going for a walk every day, right? Something like that. So a protocol might look like a lot of different things. So when someone comes into me for a follow-up, first I'm like, okay, well, how did that go? Right? No judgment. Like, were you able to incorporate these things? How was that? And then the next question is, okay, and what have you noticed? How is this? When I go back through every one of their kind of goals or health concerns to see how it was impacted. Sometimes people feel better and we're like, was it the tincture? Was it the walk every day? We're not sure. Sometimes we don't know unless they stop one of them, right? But I tend to not overly concern myself with being like, that was this exact plant. That's the one, because that ends up almost shrinking my view more into this kind of mechanistic model. So I'm like, oh, okay, this holistic approach, we have these different supports for different parts of this person's pattern and presentation, right? And if they're feeling better, then I don't overcomplicate trying to understand why they're feeling better, right? We're like, all right, stay the course. Now, if they're not feeling better, we can go back to our energetic assessment, right? We can always kind of go back a step and be like, okay, did I miss something here? Was there a different approach we could have tried that we didn't, right? So I that is something that I think we're perhaps we have more flexibility with, right? Because of that energetic and vitalist approach, we might say, was there an obstruction I missed there, right?
I think the only thing I'll add is that for sure, like one thing that is true, I think, in both of our herbal practices, which I don't know to what degree, I would say it's definitely less so in the medical system, is that the whole experience of working with a herbalist is centered on the experience of the client or patient in terms of their own, what is happening in their body. Like, that's very important to me, is to understand how is it going.
Yeah.
Like, just to even ask that question, like how is it feeling? What's your experience of taking the herbs? Are you able to take them, as prescribed or not? And then sort of how does that feel? Sometimes people will take them for a while, and then something will happen in their lives and they'll stop. And that's good information too. It's like, well, how did it feel? You were taking them for a while and you didn't take them for a while. How did you notice? It's like just a lot of inquiry, a lot of curiosity, but also encouraging them to have that same curiosity for themselves. Because sometimes what you find is people not necessarily paying that much attention. Like we were just talking about, we're really conditioned not really pay attention to our bodies. So that is actually part of the work, is to learn to pay attention to your body and how all these different things that you might do, whether it's going for a walk or taking a tincture, how that does affect you. That's just like a really important process for people, and it's not straightforward. And it's also like people often don't realize or you don't remember how you felt before. This is also a very common thing. So something that I often do, especially with people that I've been working with for a while, is I might go back to like their first initial consultation intake, and I'll be like, hey, this is what you told me, like on the first day we worked together, like, and I'll just list off, and they'll be like, oh my God, like they won't have even realized that so many of those things are not necessarily happening anymore. And so there's just a lot, like our psychology plays tricks on us too sometimes. So there's a lot to this aspect of like what's working and what's not working, like a lot more than sort of BCI. Yeah.
Yeah, that's much.
I find it very touching that the plants which we need are coming to us. They are growing around you when you are in contact with your ground around you. And we are ourselves healers. And when we are, as more as we are connected with the environment, we are getting the healing we need. And this is deeply touching. You don't have to pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, going to the spa is great, but
Yeah.
we can't always afford to go to the spa.
Yeah.
It doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah.
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 So much.
Any other?
Take our break here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions before we take a short break?
Oh, okay, I'll ask another question. Is there anything that you take all the time? Just to kind of
That is
make
a
you
good
feel
That's a big question. That's
It's like my short answer is that there are some herbs that are safe to take long term, but it also depends on the person. It depends on the energetics, right? I could handle taking a herb every day that might make someone else not feel great because of the way that it's interacting with our bodies. So the safety of herbs is very complex in that way, right? Because every person responds differently. Yeah, there are different perhaps situations maybe where we might, yes, do herbs every day for a long time, especially in chronic illness. Most people are taking herbs most of the time.
and the more you learn about herbal medicine, you start to get a sense of which are those plants that are generally thought of as safe for long-term use and that you might even want to use, say for the rest of your life. And you kind of, yes, there are definitely could apply it. And in that way, it's like there's some aspects of herbal medicine, not all aspects. In some ways, there are some herbs that you just take for a very specific period of time, like as a therapy, like kind of the way you would with any other medicine. But there's some aspects that are it's more like a lifestyle choice. Where some of these, they're like plants, right? Plants that you take like food. They're a kind of a food. Yeah.
I get kind of nerdy about the chemistry aspect of this. I really like thinking about it. I like thinking about how phytochemicals, like we have receptors in our bodies for like an unimaginable number of different phytochemicals, right? With our bitter taste receptors, we can actually see like up to 30 or 40 different kinds of plant constituents we can recognize through our bitter taste receptors, right? For instance. So it's like we are actually designed to interact with plants. It's not like a thing where it's like, oh, I have to take this medicine because I'm sick. It's like we actually maybe can't be well without interacting with plants, right? I mean, I think we could all say we're pretty certain that we need to interact with plants and ingest plants to be well. And so yeah, herbs are one of those, they're like our micro, are the plants we eat, like our grains and our vegetables and our fruits. We get a lot more of our kind of our macronutrients from. We could consider a lot of the phytochemicals in our medicinal herbs as being kind of more micronutrients or something.
Yeah.
Question regarding energetics and aromatic medicine, and I'm not full with that. Is there some kind of parallels there?
With aromatic medicine? Oh, Ayurvedic. Oh, absolutely. I mean, Ayurveda is an energetic tradition. So if you're familiar with Ayurveda and the doshas, the doshas are basically an energetic model. Like so without going too deep into it, I don't know. We could get into it, but the short answer is absolutely Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, and basically any traditional form of medicine is based on some kind of energetic model and talks about these qualities of hot, cold, damp, and dry. And sometimes they have other qualities that they add on, like wind, and sort of there's different ones, but they're all based in energetic medicine. Yeah.
They might have different words that they use to describe them, but the doshas are all describing an energetic picture that is in a simplistic way talking about the relationship between hot, cold, damp, and dry for each of those. Yeah.
And because Chinese and Indian are very different to North American, which is the indigenous ways of knowing, which is probably kind of an aromatic sort of North America. What you find if you're not getting a certain recipe that may make that right in North America too. So talking about walking through the woods and finding things that are local to us and how important that is.
That is a bigger conversation because a lot of the medicine, the native medicines to this region are not necessarily abundant enough to harvest a lot of. So we both do use a lot of plants that we can grow easily here, but that aren't necessarily native to here. That's kind of a bigger conversation. Maybe for another class. Yeah. Yeah.
But would that be your goal more to use local as opposed to?
Well, local, yes, but not necessarily native plants. Like sometimes, yes, but we want to be very careful to not
It's just like
disrupt the environment.
it's like a lot of the plants that are traditional indigenous medicines here are like woodland plants, which are under threat. So even though maybe they would be great plants to use, we want to use herbs that are sustainable. So maybe we can't really use those plants, even if we wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah. And it depends on how easily they are to be cultivated and things like that. So we might cultivate some of those native plants, and then we can use them. Yeah.
And it's also interesting how plants are designed to need fungi. The earlier kingdom of
Yes.
creatures which are not plants, and that plants are also designed to need animals as well.
Yes.
That
Yes.
they don't
Yes.
that we're
Yeah,
all
that's great.
inseparable biologically.
Yes.
Yes.
It's just shocking, and we have those phytoreceptors, which are plant receptors, or fungal receptors
Yeah.
for all these things, and it's just amazing.
It's amazing.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
We are plants. We're literally are not different.
Yes.
And-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The DNA is so simple, similar.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a break.
We have some big hands-on
Oh, we have
component after this.
Well, Okay.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
We're gonna take a short
And
break.
Susan, you had a question. Oh, you can hand out. Okay,
Okay.
right.
We'll just take 5 minutes if that's okay. Just to go to the bathroom and
Yeah.
get a drink. So we're about to get into sort of the more hands-on portion where we're going to actually be tasting some teas and applying some of those principles. But before we did that, we wanted to just take just a couple of minutes to do our little shameless plug about some of the programs that we offer, just to let you all know about them. We won't go into them in like too much detail, but for people that are maybe interested in them, you can come up to us after and like talk to us and ask us about them. So the main program that we're really promoting now that's starting in May is our intermediate herbal medicine program. So this is a program that we started because there wasn't really anything else like it. Definitely not around in the province. A herbal medicine program at this level of intensiveness. So basically, it's a 250-hour program. It's 10 weekends over the course of a year. So we have like one weekend session a month, and then in between the weekends, there's a bunch of online learning that people do. There's pre-recorded classes that people watch. So there's about 12 to 15 hours of pre-recorded classes per month to watch in between the live weekends. And people come in person and people also join us online. So we have people that are Zooming in, and 9 of the weekends are held in Blockhouse at the Central Waldorf School, and one of the weekends, more of a 3-day weekend, it's an outdoor, call it a camping trip, but you don't have to camp if you don't want to, but you can, at the Gaspereau Mountain Herbal Medicine Sanctuary in the valley. Really, really beautiful place where there's just an amazing number of medicinal plants, and really cool place. So that's kind of the broad strokes of the program, and maybe I'll just Ember, just explain some of the details.
Yeah.
Like what we actually do in the program.
One thing we always want to be clear about too, we call it an intermediate program more so because it is more of a commitment. It's more of a deep dive, but it is open to beginners. But we do find that beginners will kind of have a little bit of a like needing to kind of catch up on terminology and that kind of thing. So often people will do some self-study or, maybe some other beginner classes beforehand just to kind of dip their toes in and make sure that they are really wanting that kind of intense deep dive. But if you know that you're wanting that intense deep dive and you're a beginner, that's fine. So, yeah. And so, yeah, like Oren said, we have this combined online and in-person. And to explain a little bit about how we separate that, we do most of the lecture materials as pre-recorded videos, right? So we cover 50 plants in depth. We cover about 30 different conditions, right? Different health concerns, that kind of thing. As you watch videos on them, you get kind of the download from us. And then in class, and also in an anatomy and physiology class, you also get as the pre-record. So those are all what you do self-paced between the weekends. Then when we come together, because you've watched those videos, we can do like case study practice. We taste the plants. We talk about, our experiences with the plants. So it's a lot more, hands-on experiential. We do the medicine making. We do nutrition, phytochemistry, plant connection, right? There's a lot of other classes that we also do on those weekends, but we try and keep them much more kind of engaged. So yeah, it seems like it's been working quite well to have a lot of that kind of lecture component be something that people don't have to just sit in the classroom, right? And that we can kind of do more of the active discussion together. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, and the goal is for people to be able to have confidence and a solid understanding of how to use these plants for themselves, for their families, and also for their communities. And for some people that take the program might want to go on to become professional herbalists, and it's a good foundation for that. Quite a good foundation for that as well. You get 250 hours of core herbal subject study, and you need about 1,000 hours to be registered as a herbalist.
You only need 500 of the core herbal subject.
You only need
so it's like, Yeah.
Yeah, so you actually get quite a lot of hours towards professional registration if that was your goal. And we also both offer programs that are less intensive. So like I offer what I call a beginner program, which is just one Sunday a month. So it's and there's no online component. Yeah, there's posters here. So I have a program that's only 60 hours. It's a much smaller commitment. Still a great way to like learn botany and plant ID and learn how to make different preparations and be in a really great community of people, but just like much smaller commitment. Still a fair commitment. Still 10 Sundays over the course of the year, but smaller than the intermediate program. And Ember is going to be offering some one-off classes or a series.
Yeah, I'm doing a series this year from like there's going to be May, June, July. The July one we're doing together actually, and then September. And it's going to be like a 4-part series that can be taken alone or it can be bundled and taken all together. And that's going to be at my friend's farm in their medicinal herb gardens. They're herb farmers just in Centrally, so near Bridgetown, Nova Scotia, so in the valley. Yeah. So, and that's sort of designed for people to be able to commute, right? It's like, it's only 4 days for the whole year. Yeah, it's, you know, it is 2 hours from here, so it's no joke, but it's like 10 to 4:30. So hopefully if people do want to come, you know, from other parts of the province, that it's not totally accessible. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and you can ask us more about them later if you're interested. We got posters. I mentioned we have our newsletter sign up. Just FYI, there's the Transition Bay newsletter sign up is over there. So that's not for us. So if you want to get on our newsletter, you have to sign up over here just to make sure there's no confusion about that. 2 newsletters in different corners. Okay, so should we dive into the hands-on stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you have questions about the stuff we're offering, just stay after for a few minutes and we'll be able to answer those questions then.
So since I'm leading this part, I'm going to ask you to Okay. So what are you doing? What are we doing here?
So just wait a sec before you start to wait till everyone has them.
Yeah, I'm just going to preamble.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just telling you what to drink it all.
Yeah. So you're
We're
playing
gonna
against me.
intentionally drink it together.
Yeah, don't drink it. Don't drink it. I know you're not going to be. I know you're not going to be all over the place.
Oh, no.
Don't drink. So what we're gonna do here, the principles that we're applying right now,
Kool-Aid?
vitalism and energetics. We're gonna taste 2 different plants that have very different energetics. And we're gonna really be able to experience those energetics, and we're gonna talk about what does that mean in terms of the plants, how the plants work in our bodies. And this section of the class, because it's winter, because it's cold and flu season still, we're gonna focus on immune system health, or like things that have to do with the immune system, treating colds and flus with herbs. So these plants, even though they have many other uses, we're going to focus on this aspect just because it's seasonal, okay? And from an energetic lens. Make sense? Okay. So once everyone has one, is there anybody still waiting? Everybody over here got one? One here. There you go. And then
Everyone have one?
one's got one except you. There's a couple here. Okay. So this isn't like a bottoms up type of thing. This is a slow sip. So just whenever you're ready, we're just gonna in silence, we're just gonna drink it. And I want you all to just pay attention to how it feels in your mouth, in your body, any sensations that's happening, anything that's happening for you, any emotions you're feeling, any physical sensations, just all of it. It's a kind of a meditation, a tea meditation of sorts. So I'll let you go ahead.
Did you say an olive?
You could as much as you want. Just sip it. You know, you don't have to knock it all back. So, any observations? Anybody?
Hot.
Got a hot?
Warm and it transported me back to the place because I recognized what I'm thinking. That's great.
Yeah, this is a very common plant. Ginger, in case anybody was wondering. So a lot of people have recognized the taste.
So memory, but also the sensation of warmth.
It transported you to a specific memory.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, isn't that amazing?
It gave me a certain image, like that I would call maybe foundation. It's like long and thin and dark and good. Subtle.
Maybe we call it. I can taste it all in the tip of my tongue.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it kind of lingers on the roof of my mouth too. A little like fuzziness or something almost.
But I can also feel it like as it goes down. It's warming away.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for me it's almost too much. Like I tend to be hot already. So I'm like
Yeah, that's like,
whereas some people I know are like, oh, feels very nourishing. Depends, that's a concept that has to do with your own personal energetics, right? So, okay, so I think we've figured out energetically this plant is going to be warming or cooling, right? Which one is it? Warm. Okay, and how about on the dry, moist spectrum? Any thoughts on that?
dry.
Got more votes for dry than for moist. So the tea, because it's in a liquid form, it's moist because it's in tea. You're literally drinking liquid, but the herb energetics itself is drying. And some of the ways you might sense that, some people might find if it's drying out your mouth. Is that your salivate? It's making you salivate.
It'll often have like an initial drying, but then a little while later we can get some salivation.
You get salivation and it's almost in a response to the dryness of So, another thing about this plant, because it's spicy, it's aromatic. These aromatic plants do have very direct connections to our memory centers. So that's why you might drink this tea and it might take you right back to a memory. So this is particular, like not all types of plants have that strong connection to memories. It's most going to often be those more aromatic plants that do that. And that just has to do with how the aromatic properties interface with our nervous system. So, okay. So ginger is what we call an aromatic or a pungent herb. And this quality of it being aromatic is what we call in herbal medicine a foundational action, which means it's the action of the herb itself is that it's aromatic. And that action, that aromatic quality, tells you something about what the herb does in the body. So there's 6 foundational actions. I won't go through them all right now, but basically the foundation actions are actions of herbs that are discernible by our senses. So just by knowing that this plant is pungent, that it's spicy, that it's aromatic, we already know certain things about what it does in the body. So and what other similar herbs might do in the body. So other pungent, spicy herbs are herbs like garlic, hot peppers, horseradish. These are all herbs that have a similar pungent taste, and they're all going to have to some degree or less similar properties. Not the same, they're all unique, but they're going to have similar properties. Some of those properties are going to be that when it comes to, since we're focusing on immune system health, they have a lot of properties, effects on the lung and our mucus. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little bit of a focus on these pungent herbs and how they affect our lungs and our mucous membranes. So they help to thin and improve the flow of mucus while improving circulation. Okay, so if you're thinking of pungent herbs I want to talk about them in terms of prevention of cold and flu. and treatment for cold and flu. So if you're thinking of pungent herbs for prevention, they're most indicated for people that tend towards damp, congested infections. And they can actually be irritating to people that tend towards dry, irritative infections. So you kind of know who you are. You know that when you get sick, are you the type of person that gets that like mucusy cough and there's like mucus everywhere? Or are you the type of person that gets like that dry, hacking cough? So if you're the type of person that gets the mucusy cough, then pungent herbs are going to be great for you. Maybe you have a tendency to pneumonia. Some people have that, they've got pneumonia year after year. Then taking pungent herbs all winter long are going to help be kind of like a hedge against getting that kind of infection because they're drying, they're helping to move the flow of mucus. But if you're the type of person that gets that dry, irritating cough, it might be too drying for you. It might not be the right herb for you to be taking over the winter season. When it comes to therapies, let's say you're already sick now, right? You already have a cold, you're already coughing. Pungent herbs are going to be most indicated, and I hinted at this at the beginning of the talk, so you might remember be talking about these two kinds of coughs, the damp cough and the dry cough. So pungent herb, which kind of cough is it going to be the most appropriate for? The damp cough or the dry cough?
Damp.
The damp cough, right? Because they're going to help thin, move the mucus, get it up out of the body. So again, in terms of aiding the vital force, this process of creating excess mucus and getting it out of the body is actually a very normal, healthy part of our immune system functioning. Mucus is actually really, really important. We tend to think of mucus as kind of gross, but actually it's an amazing substance that's really, really important for our health. It's our body's first line of defense against infection. So when pathogens come into our body, in our lungs, for example, they get trapped in the mucus and they don't have to go any further than that into your body. If the mucus is doing a great job, they'll just get stuck in the mucus. Immune cells will come, take care of it, and it's done right then and there. And that's a great way to prevent actually infections from going deeper. So we want our mucus to function well. And so if there is a pathogen creating a lot of mucus and there's like a lot of immune activity in the lungs, which is creating a lot of mucus, then just taking an herb is just going to help to get it moving and get it expelled out of the body. Again, is going to support that vital force, our natural drive towards healing from this infection. Okay, but only if it's this damp cough. If it's this other kind of dry, irritated cough, these pungent herbs could irritate it more. It could actually make your cough worse. So it can happen. This often happens with herbalists that are kind of new to herbal medicine. You learn about ginger. Oh, ginger is a great cough medicine. And you have a friend who's got a cough. You're like, here, take ginger. It's a great cough medicine. And they take it, and then it makes it worse. They're like, what did you give me that stuff for? So it all depends on the energetics. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's ginger. Maybe I won't go into too much more about it. Obviously, ginger does a lot of different things in the body. It's a circulatory stimulant. Pungent herbs do that too. It's anti-inflammatory. It's used for arthritis. It's used for like a lot of different kinds of things. But we're not doing a whole class on ginger. I'm just using it to illustrate these energetics right now. So just know that we've just really tip of the iceberg, talked about the tip of the iceberg when it comes to ginger. But it's a good illustration of how pungent the energetics of pungent herbs and how they work in the lungs. So now let's go to the second one. This. I'm going to strain it in. So, but I want everybody to see this.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we got.
Was it lemon balm in that too? So I smelled lemon balm.
It was just ginger. It was straight up
Fresh.
It was fresh ginger.
And you didn't simmer it, right? You just pour the hot water.
I just steeped it for a while, for a couple of hours.
I taught this class last weekend, and I used dry ginger
Okay.
instead of fresh because I didn't have any fresh.
Yeah.
And I also just steeped it.
Okay.
It was much stronger.
Yes.
So with ginger, you just have to kind of watch that, right? Like you can make a mild tea, but you can very easily make a very concentrated tea. So just watch it. You can always dilute it.
This was a pretty mild ginger tea. You know, on the scale.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody watch this. Okay, so this is another herb.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you can see, you might even get a sense of this is my favorite part.
We can't hardly hear you.
We're squeezing it to get the kind of
Gelatinous, is it?
it's mucilage.
Okay. Yeah, you can go around. Hopefully not. Still not.
I'm good at pouring. Trust me, it's one of the superpowers.
Okay. So maybe while Ember's going around, well,
Down.
maybe while Ember's going around, any questions about pungent herbs or anything else we've talked about so far?
Would you mind just, sorry.
Yeah.
Would you mind saying the word, is it demulcent?
Demulcent.
Demulcent, and I don't know that word, and I also don't know the other word. But give me that one.
So we use a lot of words. It's a lot of words.
So
Yeah. There's a lot of vocabulary in herbal medicine. So the actions, the herbal actions are a lot of vocabulary words. A lot of them are kind of old time words that were once in common usage but are no longer in common usage. But we use them, right? Because the herbs have been used for a long time, and these older ways of understanding them are often more effective than some of our newer language. So some of our newer language are terms like anti-inflammatory, antibacterial. These are kind of actions of herbs that you might be familiar with, but these other ones like demulcent or carminative or amenagogue, these are all kind of herbal action words that are older words that, and this is vocabulary that you get to know the more you study herbal medicine. So like when we talked about our intermediate program, you kind of have to get up to speed on this vocabulary. So a demulcent, well, I don't want to tell you too much about what demulcent means because I don't want to spoil it, but you will know exactly what it means very soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
an experiential definition.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? You could start
Sipping.
you could start sipping. Yeah, we can start doing that thing that we do.
Let's see the words.
Me, please. So, any thoughts, experience of this one? Oops. Cooler. Mm-hmm.
Bitter.
You think it tastes a little bitter? Interesting.
Yes, it's viscous. Like,
Viscous coating. I love this. This is a great word. That's right. This plant.
Quite put my finger on it. There's some vegetable that this reminds me of, like a green bean.
Stingy nip.
it tastes
Familiar, in other words.
it really smell like raw potato with water. You know, when you-
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
Starchy.
The starchy. Yes.
spinach water.
I
Yeah.
thought it was bitter. I thought it was more sweet.
Spinach.
Sweet.
Not
Yes.
sweet, but not bitter.
Yes. I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying by sweet. So this herb is called marshmallow root, or the herb was called marshmallow, but this is the root that we're drinking. And I think we heard viscous, thick. Okay, is it moistening or drying? Moistening. Is it warming or cooling? Cooling. Yeah, I think we might call it cooling or even neutral. Neutral to cooling is how we would describe it. It's a little nuance there. Because it's moistening and neutral, that often ends up having a cooling effect just by the moisteningness of it. So this plant is one of our most demulcent herbs. Demulcent meaning that it's rich in mucilage. That's what demulcent means, and that it's slimy and moistening. That's what demulcent means. That it has a soothing and coating effect, specifically on mucous membranes. So when we talk about herbs being demulcent, we are usually referring to them having a soothing, moistening, healing effect on our mucous membranes. And when you drink this tea, for example, it coats all the mucous membranes of your entire digestive system. So marshmallow root is actually a major herb for the digestive system. Now, we're not focused on that today, but I will talk a little bit about it. But before we do that, I do want to keep us focused on the lungs, right? So if we were talking about ginger, this pungent herb being appropriate for a damp, congested cough, what kind of cough would this demulcent, moistening herb be appropriate for? A dry cough. So if you have a dry, hacking cough, the demulcent herb is going to have a soothing effect and will help to relieve that dryness. Now, sometimes you have coughs that are kind of like in between, where it's like, oh, this is feels like a dry cough, but I know there is mucus stuck in there, like it's just not coming out. It's kind of like the coughs don't always fit themselves into these neat categories that we use in classes. But in those cases, you can actually combine them. So you can combine demulcent and pungent herbs together so that you get the soothing effect on the cough, but then you still get the expectorant effect. That's another purple vocab word of the pungent herb, which is to help to get the mucus out. So that's how we would use this in a sort of therapy situation. Now, for prevention, right? Because we use herbs for therapy, we also use them for prevention. In some ways, it's more desirable if you can get ahead of things to use them in the preventative fashion. So for prevention, demulcent herbs like marshmallow are really appropriate for people that tend towards dryness. So if you find that in the wintertime, you're the kind of person that has dry lips, dry mouth, your skin's dry and flaky, your hair, you know if you're one of these people that tends towards dryness, you tend to have, maybe you even have a cough. Maybe you walk into a house with a wood stove and you start coughing, just from the dryness. That's you. You're that type of sort of drier person. Well, you're really going to benefit from drinking something like marshmallow root tea over the course of the entire winter season. It's going to help keep your mucous membranes moist and supple, and therefore doing their job of being that effective barrier against infection. So that's how you use marshmallow, moistening herb, differently than a pungent herb for respiratory health. Because it's such a major herb for the digestion, though, I do want to just touch on it, that you could also use marshmallow or these demulcent herbs to soothe any type of hot, irritated, inflamed mucous membrane. So if you just picture a mucous membrane in your body, just picture those mucous membranes being hot, being irritated, being inflamed. So if you think about in your digestive tract, are there any kind of conditions that might come to mind? Yeah, like heartburn, that's like primo right there. So it's a really wonderful remedy for heartburn, or even gastric ulcers, or other types of inflammatory conditions, or like inflammatory bowel conditions, like ulcerative colitis, or even Crohn's disease, that has a role to play in helping to soothe the inflamed tissues. It's not all you would do. I mean, those last two conditions I mentioned are autoimmune conditions, so there's a lot more to talk about in terms of how we would approach something like that. But as a soothing, healing part of a protocol for something like that, marshmallow can be actually quite a game changer for people in terms of relieving their symptoms. So yeah, that's a little bit about marshmallow. One thing I want to say before we move on, Ember's going to do the next couple of herbs, is that it's kind of a little special how you make this tea. Usually with teas, you think about steeping them in hot water, but in marshmallow root, you steep it in lukewarm or cold, room temperature, tepid water, and you just let it sit in the tepid water for a couple of hours is usually enough. The longer you let it sit, the more slimy the liquid will get. Yeah. Yeah, so marshmallow is interesting in terms of its laxative effects. It actually helps both constipation and diarrhea. So it does act as a bulk laxative because it does moisten the stool. So and lets the stool sort of flow out. Flow, assuming that's the right word. But it helps you pass your stools much more easily. So people that are constipated do find marshmallow can help ease their constipation, but not in a very stimulating the way like some laxatives will really make you have a bowel movement. Marshmallow doesn't do that, but it can just help your stool to pass more smoothly. On the flip side, for people that have diarrhea, because the mucilage can actually help add bulk to the stool and help to firm it up. So it's kind of a nice. It can be nice for both types of situations, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, marshmallow the root. Where does it grow native?
Yeah, you could grow it. It's pretty easy to grow, and it's a beautiful plant. And you don't have to just use the root. You can also use the leaves and the flowers. They're also demulcent, not as demulcent as the root. And yeah, it is definitely a plant that you can grow, and it's not hard to do. You know,
Is there a difference between marshmallow and the common mallow, which is an ornamental flower that's an invasive, but is local as well?
yeah. So the common mallow is also demulcent. It's not the same plant. It's not even the same species.
They're related, but
They're related, yeah. But the common mallow is demulcent, and so you can use the common mallow as a substitute, although it's not as demulcent. So when I use therapeutically, I stick to marshmallow. But obviously, with invasive species, one that's around a lot, if it's there, might as well use it. I don't know if you have much experience using it.
I haven't used it. No.
Yeah.
I mean, I have used different mallow species in different bioregions for sure, just like based on whether they're demulcent or not. But the one here, not so much. Just like some
Yeah, but it's a good point.
Yeah, just do a double check on safety and stuff like that. Just recommend just making sure you've ID'd it correctly, and that's one thing about growing the plants. You're pretty sure you know exactly what the plant is when you grow it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything to like preferences as related to yours? Like, for example, the ginger was tasting, like, oh, it's wonderful. But I suffer from yearly dry fingers. And as soon as I took the ginger, I was like, oh, I get to feel it immediately. And as soon as I drank this, which I did not like the taste of nearly as much, it was extreme, like I immediately noticed the difference. And it was that I just a little pop like I am. It was a perfect example.
Yeah.
What I would have chosen to drink. Like I would drink ginger tea all the time. I really thought it would be worse. So I'm just curious if there's something with the body of like, instead of craving the thing that's better for you, craving the thing that's aggravating.
Well, I find it's one of these things where our preferences don't always line up with what we need, although often they do. So sometimes if you like, I guess like you can be accustomed to something that you like and have a preference for it that way, but your body could be telling you something else. So like in your case, you even said my body told me that it wasn't my initial taste was like, I don't maybe like this as much because I'm not familiar with it, but my body told me that I liked it or that I needed it. And so I do find that people usually if people need marshmallow, they'll actually like it and they'll often even like the taste. So it's a little unusual that you didn't like the taste of it, but it felt good for you. Oftentimes if people need marshmallow, I find they like it, or if they taste it, they're like, this is horrible. Often they don't need it. But it can be a little confusing because sometimes you prefer things for like all kinds of reasons. You have an association with it from childhood, or like, there's lots of different reasons why you might like something.
It was more of a, it was also because of something that I really like the taste of. It's like comparatively, right? Yeah, that's interesting.
I also find just like working with people in clinical practice, people will often be like, oh, I didn't like the tea for the first week. And then they develop more of a taste for it, right? Maybe that's because they notice the effects of it, or maybe it's just because when it's an unfamiliar taste, we tend to be like, oh, what's that? Right? So, all right. So,
which one first?
Well, we're going to do echinacea first, but not for a bit.
Okay.
So, we're going to talk about immune system resilience kind of overall now. And what Oren's been talking about with the mucous membranes is what we would call the first line of defense of the immune system, right? It's our skin, our mucous membranes. It's like our external barrier to things being able to enter our bodies, right? And be able to, catch infections, things like that. But when we talk about the vital force, we also need to consider what happens when an infection does get in, right? What if an infection makes it past that mucous membrane barrier, right? One thing is we need to make sure, okay, how are we taking care of that mucous membrane, right? Is there enough mucus, too much mucus, things like that in terms of that protection? We also need to think about that deeper level, which is kind of getting a little bit more physiological, right? What we know about it now is that there's all of these different immune cells that are circulating in our tissues, circulating in our blood, like our white blood cells, right? Our T cells, our B cells, our natural killer cells, all those that are actually doing a lot of, of the work to, do things like stimulate the antibody response or, help to communicate between the different parts of the body in terms of the immune system, helps to, initiate healing process, stuff like that. So we're not going to go into a whole thing about the immune system, but just imagining there's sort of this deeper level, right? It's a kind of a good explanation in a way of the vital force. Like we think about like, oh, people who tend to get sick all the time, we kind of might describe as having a bit of a weaker vital force, right? So for people who get really frequently sick, or if you get sick and you can't get over it, right? If you tend to be the kind of person who's like, okay, you might only get sick once a year, but it might take you weeks to feel like actually recovered, then we kind of want to start to think about, okay, what's going on in that deeper level? And, this is definitely playing back into, in terms of our principles, playing back into the principle around, integrative healthcare and filling the gaps, right? Because these are the kind of things that like, there just isn't actually other healthcare for, right? So in terms of preventative care and addressing these kinds of, just sort of what we call self-limiting condition, like a cold or flu, these kinds of sicknesses, we kind of have to manage them on our own, right? So we may as well have more skills to do that, right? Okay, so there's also other things that we're going to want to consider, right? It's not just herbs. We're also going to want to consider, or just the mucous membranes. We might want to consider, is someone getting enough sleep? Are they getting enough nutrition? Are they under a lot of stress, right? These are all things that can have huge impacts on that deeper immune function, right? The strength and numbers of those cells that we need to fight infections. So we're not going to go into all of that, but I just want to kind of like lay that out as, we know that there's many different aspects to it. Okay, so what we call deep immunity, we're kind of asking this question from the vitalist perspective: do we have the resources to mount a proper defense? And we have two different types of herbs here. And one of the reasons we bring this into this class is we know that these are often herbs that are used quite commonly. And we know a lot of times people might not use them in the way that we think that they are the most effective. So we're going to kind of share that with you. So the two classes of herbs, or two herbal actions, are immune stimulant and immunomodulant. We're going to do immunomodulant first. Let's do echinacea first, actually. Let's do immune
Stimulant first?
Yeah, okay. So immune stimulants, these are herbs that increase the division and action of our immune cells in the short term.
Do you want to explain to people what I'm going to do here?
So Oren is going to come around and give you all a drop of a tincture. It's echinacea. And so what you're going to do is put your hand out. And when you put your hand out, especially when you like move your thumb, this is like a thing that you learn as a herbalist to take little samples. We ended up with like a little divot kind of there. And so Oren's going to give you all a drop of the tincture there. And then you're going to lick it off your hand to avoid the like dropper being near everyone's mouths, right?
Pressure.
Yeah, definitely no pressure. So this is echinacea, and I want you to notice as you're licking it, the sensation that's going to come after, a few seconds. It should kind of be a little bit weird, tingly, numbing. We want that. And the reason that I want to share this with you all is because a lot of the tinctures that you get of echinacea in like the drugstore, even the health food stores, are not going to have that. And that is telling you that the constituents that we want are extracted. That feeling. Right? The constituents that we want to extract out of echinacea is that tingling, gives us that tingling sensation. So if we get a tincture and it doesn't give us that, it's not a good extraction. So I want you to just try and remember that taste as you get it. But okay, so immune stimulants are herbs that increase the short-term division and increase communication of and action of our immune cells. And so these are things that we take in the short term, generally speaking, kind of at the first sign of an infection, or maybe everyone in our household is sick, or I just took an airplane and the person next to me was coughing the whole time, or something like that, right? Or you can tell you're kind of fighting something off, right? whenever we're kind of knowing, okay, I need to give my immune system like a short-term boost, like kind of right now, that's when we take our immune stimulants. Okay. Now, echinacea is a very common one that people often will, take. They can buy it in drugstores, things like that. But other ones are like things like fresh garlic and elderberry, right? These are other immune stimulants. So they're most appropriate when you sort of the initial signs of and during an acute infection. They also, like especially echinacea specifically, actually really increases the part of our immune system that increases the activity of our antibody response, right? Which is great if you're exposed to a new infection. Okay, it might make you get over it way faster. But if you have an autoimmune condition, taking echinacea can actually, and I have seen this in my practice, can actually sometimes for some people actually increase some of those symptoms of the autoimmune condition, right? So rheumatoid arthritis or even sometimes seasonal allergies. I've seen it with that before as well. So just keep that in mind with this plant. Like if you tend to be someone with a lot of allergies and a lot of hyperreactivity and maybe autoimmune kind of stuff going on, that you might want to choose the garlic or the elderberry for your like kind of short-term immune support. Then we have immune tonics. And we also call these immunomodulants. Yeah, and shake that because it's a little extract. So, so immunomodulants are generally, this word is like generally, herbalists will sometimes use these words a little differently, just going to say, right? So, but the way that Oren and I both use the word immunomodulant is to describe herbs that have a more deeply strengthening and regulating effect on the immune system overall, right? So these are going to have a cumulative effect over time. They're actually going to help to, more slowly build up the strength and resilience of that deeper immune system. So these are the kinds of herbs that we might actually, give someone who has low white blood cell counts, right? Where we need them to come up, for someone to be able to have an adequate immune response, for instance. For someone who's getting sick all the time, for someone who takes a long time to get over being sick. These herbs you would take for the most part regularly, right? Over months, sometimes even years, right? Weeks, months, years is kind of how we would think about these. And the one that you're tasting is called astragalus. It's a Chinese medicine herb. And I'm giving it to you as a tincture, but most people would do water extract of it. This is a dual extract, which is a somewhat complicated thing that I'm not going to explain. So you can do that for the tincture as well, but a lot of people will do it in like soups or broths or as a decoction, right? A nice strong tea. It has, does anyone want to share what the taste is like for astragalus? Sweet. Yeah. A little fruity. Like licorice. Yes. Yes. Well, there is glycerin in it, so that is giving it. Yeah, it's not just the astragalus that's sweet, but astragalus is actually sweet just in itself, even without the glycerin. And the glycerin is in there just to emulsify the water and alcohol portions, but it's. I don't like tasting echinacea, so I'm not going to. Did you all get that tingling? Just for one drop, okay? It's so good. One drop. One drop. Yeah. Yep. So some other immunomodulants that are quite common are medicinal mushrooms, right? Reishi, turkey tail, shiitake, even some of our like culinary mushrooms, right? They have these polysaccharides, which are complex sugar chains with these complex protein chains attached to them, which actually interact with the gut-associated lymphatic tissue in our digestive tracts to stimulate our immune function. So what? They're not even absorbed. Those constituents are not absorbed systemically, right? Yeah. So so this is important to note though, because some people will take reishi or astragalus, they hear, oh, it's good for the immune system, so they'll take it in the short term, right? Oh, I'm getting sick, I'll take them. There are different schools of thought as to whether or not that is appropriate at all. But I would say the general approach would be that it's not really going to do something for you in that short term, right? You're really if you're wanting to strengthen your immune system, you really need to kind of incorporate them in a more regular way, like almost a food-like way into your daily or at least, multiple times a week kind of routines, right? And for the immediate, okay, I need something to support my immune system right now, we use those immune stimulants, right? So elderberry, garlic, zinc is another good one as well. So just wanted to differentiate that for you all so that you have a better sense of like what to be bringing in when and what is appropriate. Generally speaking, these immunomodulants, these deep immune strengthening herbs, are usually considered to be safe for long-term use, and they're generally safe for autoimmune conditions. That being said, it depends a little bit on the person, right? So I'm not going to just always make that assumption totally. I'm going to still kind of be doing some monitoring, especially with astragalus. It kind of goes both ways. Some people with autoimmune conditions might respond a little bit to it negatively, but most people are okay with it. The medicinal mushrooms are pretty safe for autoimmune conditions, generally speaking. I haven't heard any really clear case reports of them causing flares. So just wanted to kind of give that differentiation as well. Yeah. And so those are the two types of immune herbs we could be thinking about. And the other thing I wanted to kind of mention is just like, okay, we're talking about the vital force. We're talking about, we talked about, okay, what are obstructions to the vital force? So how can we be aiding the vital force in the healing process, right? And things like getting enough rest. It's really important. And that's one that like we don't always have access to. You can't always take enough sick days, right? So that's also real. So it's like getting as much as we can. Getting outside and getting movement regularly helps a lot. The circulation of blood, the circulation of lymph really, really helps with just general immune function overall. I think, yeah, getting, enough vitamin D, sunshine is also really important. Trying to manage our stress levels, right, can be really helpful for our immune function as well. And yeah, just to recognize like these aren't always things that we're going to have access to, right? Because of all the things that we talked about. But the more that we can know about them, the more that we can be empowered at least to see, okay, well, where can we make a difference? And that's, I think, a way that we both practice. It's like, okay, we might not be able to take all the sick days, but can we support the body and support the vital force in another way, right? So that there's less, so that the body can at least heal in as much as it can, right? Yeah, so that is our class. We're really glad that you all came. Hope that you learned some new things about herbs and are leaving here with some practical skills that you can use to apply into your life to use herbs a bit more effectively, specifically around respiratory and immune health. And and if you're curious and you're wanting to do more, then please come chat with us or sign up for our newsletter to see what we're doing. And one of our hit classes is happening this July is our first aid class. And everyone leaves with a herbal first aid kit, including little things for tick bites, which I think is like, we all need that, don't we? So we're going to do that class together in July. We'll also do a herbal roots class together where we dig up roots together, very hands-on, make tinctures, that kind of stuff here in September as well. So those are the two classes that we're teaching together this coming year, as well as all the stuff we're doing separately as well. So yeah. Thankful.
I was wondering about taking these samples so close together. Wouldn't it make it maybe not, not completely clear what's working and what's not working?
Like just for today?
Yeah, just for today.
Yeah, well,
I know it's just a sample class.
Yeah, and the doses are going to be so different too, right?
Yeah.
Like, because if you're doing it for a condition, you would be dosing it a lot higher than we're doing in class. But for sure, sometimes the taste of the last one could still be on your tongue. So,
Everyone's different too. Like in our classes, we do tend to taste a lot of herbs, and so over the course of a day, you might taste, like 6, 7, maybe more herbs. And some people it's just too much. They're just like, I can't do it, and then they don't. It's like
take a break.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, can feel overwhelming. Like you're not used to all these tastes, especially if you're sensitive. So that's totally normal. People find it's too much, too many herbs to taste.
In herb school, we have to do like organoleptic tests. Did you do that? I don't know. Like we actually had like materia medica tests where they would like put herbs and tinctures out, and we would have to taste them all and like match them multiple choice. So it was like, yeah, it was like a huge part of our materia medica. We were like, we had to know the exact taste of each herb, both as a tincture and a bulk herb. It was intense. Like those tests, we'd all be like, whoa.
Yeah.
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 I would sign it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can just go to kind of more mingling and come on up and talk to us if you want.
Yeah,
So.
you can sign up if you want or ask more questions. Or, yeah.
Thank you all for coming,
Yeah,
and
thank
thank you to Transition Bay for hosting us.
Thank you.